Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the Vertel SD-WAN Indicator 2020 report for Australia. I'm Tony Hudson, Commercial Director for Vertel. In the spirit of reconciliation, Vertel acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Before we get started today, I just wanted to go through just a couple of minor housekeeping items. One is this should be the interface that you will see as an attendee today. You'll be listening in using your computer's audio. Should you need to adjust that audio, on the bottom left of the screen are the audio settings. That'll pop a screen such as you can see here. Make whichever adjustments you need. Similarly, we very much welcome questions for our presenter today. In the middle of the screen at the bottom, there's a Q&A button, which will pop a screen that you're able to just input your questions here, and at the end of the presentation today we'll have a Q&A session using that information. During the presentation, by all means, feel very comfortable sending questions through to us. By way of background, Vertel is a provider of SD-WAN services in the Australian marketplace, was observing that there was marked change in the uptake and the drivers for SD-WAN uptake in our market, and we wanted to get some independent analysis of that information to see what were the drivers in the marketplace, what were key issues either incenting uptake of SD-WAN or potentially constraining it. So we turned to Telsyte, a well-known industry analyst organisation, to provide us with an independent view of what was happening in the market. Interestingly, whilst this research was occurring, COVID happened, and we've all experienced the impacts of that, and that has made marked changes to both the uptake of SD-WAN and also changes to what organisations are doing with their planned initiatives, whether they've brought them ahead, whether they've deferred them and so forth. So the timing on this research is really ideal in the sense of a further huge rate of change in the marketplace caused by COVID-19. We believe that information will be of value to you today, and we look forward to providing that to you. Our presenter today is Fouad Fadaghi. He is Telsyte's Managing Director and Principal Analyst. Fouad has over 20 years experience reporting and analysing the technology industry. Fouad has been a key insights partner for leading Australian and multinational companies. He's a strong presenter and public speaker, with his research often quoted in the media, and his experience crosses into journalism, where he was the former technology editor for BRW magazine. Fouad was formerly a Jupiter research analyst and the managing editor of Jupiter Media. Most recently, he has co-authored Digital Nation, a graphical book providing insights into technology adoption in Australia. Fouad has a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of New South Wales. Over to you, Fouad.
Thank you, Tony. That was a great introduction. I don't think anyone has given me the full introduction for quite a while, and it's nice to be here on the call today. Right now, I'm just going to share my presentation deck so that everyone can see it, and give everyone a little bit of background from the Telsyte point of view. So Vertel approached us to do some research into the SD-WAN market, specifically in Australia. I guess there's a lot of global data that we see, but not a lot of Australian data. And certainly Telsyte, for the last 20 years, has been very much focused on capturing that local data and local insights in terms of what businesses here are doing and how that might differ from the rest of the world as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the research. Okay. Now, I just wanted to start with the respondent profile today because it gives a good sense of who we spoke to, and certainly the businesses that we spoke to were of all business sizes from 100 employees and above. And I guess typically when we do look at SD-WAN type offerings, it is organizations that start to get larger, that have multiple sites, and indeed find their network strategic, that certainly see the need for SD-WAN. And certainly we've seen respondents come from all business sizes, and we also spoke to businesses leaders such as CEOs and senior managers, as well as those that are in IT and managing the IT of the business. We spoke to businesses that had 3 or more sites in Australia, and as you can see, the majority of the respondents had 5 to 10 sites, which is consummate with the types of businesses that it might have head offices in multiple cities across this wonderful country. And we spoke to businesses across all vertical industries as seen by ANSI classes. And, you know, this gives us a great perspective across the board to see if the trends are truly happening across the board. Now, just diving into our executive summary. What we saw from COVID-19 is really that the network and the infrastructure of businesses become critical to how companies persist and recover through this difficult period. As part of this kind of investment, really cloud has become one of the defining features of this generation. What we're seeing is that half of organizations that we spoke to plan to increase, you know, things such as cloud apps that they're adopting and services, and a lot of this is being driven by COVID-19. Another feature of the modern workplace, you know, we were just joking before the presentation, you know, my presentation usually is before entrees and mains, but today is via green screen. And certainly, you know, this is the new norm for many organizations. Almost half of the organizations that we spoke to are now supporting work from home for a lot of their workers, for the majority of the workers in most instances. I think at the same time, we're seeing WAN capacity being really stretched because of these challenges of supporting so many people across the network. Around 1 in 3 organizations told us that their WAN capacity is being stretched due to COVID-19. And similarly, around 1 in 3 are planning to increase their investments in cloud over the next 12 months. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into that a little bit later in the presentation. What we also saw is that almost 3/4 of large companies, those that have 3 sites and so forth, have invested in SD-WAN technology already. So certainly across the respondent base that we targeted, SD-WAN adoption is really mainstream and certainly has entered, I guess, a next stage or a next critical stage because of COVID-19. At the same time, you know, businesses need help with these investments. It's not just about buying something off the shelf and turning it on. Certainly managing the network has become critical for many organizations over the last decade or so. And certainly this is extended into SD-WAN, where we're seeing almost 2/3 saying that they have an SD-WAN that is partially or in whole managed by a telco or an IT service provider. Okay, moving on to some further findings well, let's put it this way. SD-WAN has become critical across the board, and we all kind of have known this going into the research, but certainly it became really evident with the data. Around 91% indicated that they see SD-WAN as an imperative for their network, something that's not a nice to have, but certainly has become a critical or a must have going into the crisis. At the same time, investment is likely to continue. This is great, I guess, for those that are working in this industry and understand the value that it brings to organizations, because the majority of organizations are starting to see this investment need in their SD-WAN operations going forward. why are organizations updating their SD-WANs? And there was a number of reasons, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into the corresponding slide in the deck. But certainly modernization has become one of those key areas that organizations are really accelerating during this pandemic. And it's not just modernizing the workforce or indeed policies. A lot of it is about the core infrastructure and modernizing the network to have that kind of network that can support an agile and scalable business, and one that supports security end to end. I guess when we look at other factors, one of the key areas that businesses have turned to is turning to existing providers. Now, around about half, not all, are certainly looking at their existing providers for help when it comes to SD-WAN, and especially those that might not yet have adopted, but certainly are looking at the technologies and the opportunities that they have going forward. And why are they making these investments? Well, the top three reasons were increased cybersecurity, better performance on their network, and also better integration of security and policy control that comes from having SD-WAN. On the flip side, we also analyze the areas that we think are hurdles, areas where organizations still need to overcome some of the challenges before they make the leap into the modern SD-WAN technologies. Certainly, cost is always seen as a barrier when it comes to technology adoption. It came up top of the pops there, as you can see, but also lack of knowledge also came in as one of the other reasons. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that as well in a following slide. All right, now we know that the changing business climate has become a big challenge for a lot of organizations. We asked the question, how has COVID-19 impacted your organization's IT services since the start of the pandemic? And we got a list of responses, and I think that the top response there was really an increased need to access cloud applications and services. Having all these people working from home, needing to access the kinds of services they did in the office at any time has become a challenge for around about half of organizations. And certainly working from home has been consummate with that as well, almost 50%. Also, remote fixing required for IT services team of network or other challenges that might be occurring has become a critical need as well for almost half of organizations. When we look at investment areas in the next 12 months that tie into those business priorities, well, certainly we saw a number of factors, a lot of factors, let's say, quite fragmented. We asked respondents to enter the top 5 priorities, and we saw a big spread of responses there. Everything from improving product service quality, improving productivity and efficiency, reducing risk, and so forth. But if we divide this down to the top 5 factors individually, reducing risk came up number 1, followed by increasing investment in cloud technologies, improving product service quality, and increasing profits and productivity and efficiency made up the top 5. We asked the question, is adopting or investing more in SD-WAN services currently on your organization's priority list? Well, certainly it was the case for the majority of organizations, whether or not they were using an SD-WAN or currently not using an SD-WAN. We saw the majority of organizations looking to adopt or moving down the path of SD-WAN. Clearly, the overall barriers that might have existed a number of years ago have been dropping significantly. Combined with the stress of COVID-19, the investment decision in SD-WAN has become clearly an area which organizations are moving down the path of. As I mentioned, modernization of the network was one of the key priorities or the reasons why organizations are going down the SD-WAN path. But better scalability than appliance-based WANs came up as number 2. Better integration of security and policies came up as number 3. Number 4, part of the digital transformation strategy, another very critical part that commenced for many organizations over the last decade or so. And last but not least, that increased usage of cloud applications, which really spiked during the start of the pandemic, but really has continued for a lot of organizations ever since. We wanted to look at the reasons, but, as I mentioned, it's quite fragmented. Organizations find a number of reasons why they're purchasing SD-WAN, and beyond the top factors, other factors included, SD-WANs are easier to adopt than traditional WANs, better flexibility. The system accommodates both fixed and mobile connections, taking the WAN right up to the edge, becoming very important for a lot of organizations. And also existing bandwidth requirements exceeded planned requirements, just driven by the sheer amount of volume that networks are seeing these days. We also probed the types of applications that are taking advantage of SD-WAN. Always very important, I guess, to initially justify the investment, but certainly to demonstrate that organizations are using it across a number of applications. Clearly, voice and IP telephony and IT telephony are a part of that. CRM, a critical cloud application, in our comms applications such as email and intranets and extranets, all critically using SD-WAN, as well as video conferencing, very much boosted by the pandemic. Now, on the question of whether or not SD-WANs have become an imperative, if we look at it across the board, it's really become an imperative for organizations across business sizes, and even those that are not looking to invest, in the back of their minds, certainly understand that there is an imperative. Almost two-thirds are indicating that they are looking at future investment in SD-WAN, even though they have no current roadmap to adopting. We wanted to probe whether or not there was stickiness between an existing WAN provider and the need for a new SD-WAN provider. And we saw that 1 in 3 prefer a specialist provider, and a lot of organizations are turning to their existing providers. Now, this presents, a low-hanging fruit, or if you like, an immediate opportunity for many organizations, turning to organizations that they trust in the first instance. But what we're seeing is that the specialist needs also are increasing, and certainly things are changing in the marketplace, and organizations are open or up for looking at specialist providers as well as some of their existing providers if they're not already specialists in the types of services that they need to get available across their network. We asked the question about the strategic nature of SD-WAN technology. Often this is very important for organizations when thinking about, is this something that we take to the board, and what does it mean for our organization in terms of its long-term strategy and where we're headed? What we're seeing, and this is certainly increased over time, is that it's become highly strategic. The network has become highly strategic for many organizations. Organizations, by and large, whether they're looking to adopt or looking to invest more, certainly are seeing it as a strategic part of their business going forward. Even some 40% of those not looking to invest currently see it as strategic for their business as well. We asked about the benefits of the benefits of SD-WAN for organizations, and the kinds of things I guess organizations have seen as a result of adopting SD-WAN in many instances. An increased cybersecurity definitely has been one of the factors that has been growing in terms of importance for organizations, but also in terms of the outcomes when organizations are investing in SD-WAN technology. Better performance or connection speed certainly is part of the equation as well. Better integration of that security, increased agility and greater resilience. All of those factors organizations indicated are critical, and certainly are seeing as benefits to their organization in adopting SD-WAN. Now on to connecting multiple sites, one of the important aspects that comes from SD-WAN technology. And we're seeing that of our survey respondents, almost 2/3 of those organizations with WANs and multiple sites are already using SD-WAN technology. And certainly for multiple sites is the main reason for that. Most traditional WANs are managed by telcos these days, and 79% of organizations using traditional WANs have it all or partially managed by a telco. I guess a lot of organizations are also managing it in-house. And I think that this interesting trend continues when we look at SD-WAN technology. in that, similarly, 63% of organizations using SD-WANs have it all partially managed by their telco or IT service partner as well. Now, we think over time this will increase as the adoption increases, and indeed the complexity of SD-WAN technology increases, and the need for that partner that can provide that advice to make the right decisions becomes critical. Now, lastly, we wanted to look at some of the barriers to SD-WAN adoption and how some of these barriers might be reduced over time. As I mentioned in the executive summary, certainly initial cost has been one of the big challenges, as well as the lack of knowledge. But I think there's other factors that have sort of simmered underneath the top factors as well. Fear of the technology is one of the areas that I think organizations are increasingly overcoming, but certainly around one in five, around 20% or so of organizations still have. Finding a good service partner, or indeed not having enough partners to support them, and the lack of skills to maintain these systems start to appear as well in terms of some of the barriers that organizations have had when it comes to SD-WAN. Now, if we look at priorities, I guess customers want to see a business case and benefits when it comes to what SD-WAN providers are talking about. When we looked at the question, why is adopting SD-WAN not currently on your organization's priority list? A sense of satisfaction with their current technology was the #1 factor, followed by prioritizing investment in other business areas, and not seeing also some of the benefits. Now, this is a very small minority of respondents that have said this to the survey. Some of the other reasons that might come up as well as reducing of operational size. Unfortunately, as businesses have shrunk as well, some of the needs might have reduced as well, particularly in those organizations that have turned to a very digital approach to distribution these days, rather than maintaining multiple sites. And last but not least, let's finish off with what encourages organizations to invest in SD-WAN technology, and what's the way forward for most organizations. And when we get asked this question, typically by organizations, we think that the main reason organizations move down this path of SD-WAN really is about the ease of migration. And we were very surprised that the research showed this as well, that certainly when there's an easy migration path from the current network, many organizations are keen to go down that path. Lowering ongoing costs, a critical factor as well. When we think about technology overall, technology is a great deflationary force in the market. So while organizations might make an initial investment up front, lower ongoing cost is always, a KPI is always something that organizations want from their investment going forward. Thirdly, confidence in provider to deploy a solution. As organizations out there that can prove their experience, have demonstrated lower ongoing costs, have proven amongst their customers that they can create an easy migration path, that also encourages businesses to make the investment and go down the SD-WAN investment path. If we're looking at two areas that are really important for organizations that are looking to invest more in the future, well, certainly providing greater resilience than their current network seems to be one of the factors that drives that investment and that need. And also a network security incident, which is really interesting because, despite what we're seeing with COVID-19, the lack of preparedness in organizations still remains low when it comes to things like cybersecurity. And when there is a network incident and a reaction to it, it's unfortunate, but I think for a lot of organizations, it's better to get on the front foot and overcome some of those challenges before they actually happen. If we look at other factors that also might drive the market in the future, well, certainly AI and using machine learning to better manage networks is something that organizations overall are looking at. As well as, having this sort of support by staff. I think that's always critical when any new technology is being developed or brought to market. Now that's me, and that's the presentation, and I'm going to switch back to Tony, and we're going to dive into some Q&A.
Thanks very much, Fawad. Let me just pop the screen share up, and Yeah, so quite insightful, the information that you've been able to collate and analyse, and whilst to some degree at a very high level, there's some elements of it which we would all go, yep, that sort of makes sense. So, for example, during the COVID period, the more rapid uptake and move to cloud, I'm certainly apparent to me that as you dig into the nuance of some of the information you've collected, there's some real insights. There's no doubt that SD-WAN is a technology and a management environment and an opportunity that's time has come. I might just, before we move further, just throw to some questions. So again, if you'd like to ask some questions, as mentioned before, do chat them through to us on the Q&A element, and I'll pass them on. But Fawad, I'm interested in, as you're going through the research and looking at the findings, what was the most surprising element of what stood out for you from the research?
Thanks, Tony. I think what we saw, and it's really a function of the time that we did the research, but we also expect it to kind of continue, is really the rapid rate of adoption. If we turn the clock back 12 months or even 24 months, the sorts of adoption rates that we experienced because of the pandemic or leading into the pandemic have been really rapid. And I guess this is kind of surprising to me. The growth curve has been a little bit faster than what you'd expect for a technology that's at its current stage of evolution. But certainly, I think it really is demonstrating that organizations are not thinking of SD-WAN as a nice to have. That time has really passed. It's really now a point of execution for many businesses, and that was really apparent in the data.
Thanks very much, Fawad. Another question we've had is, as we move beyond 2020 and into whatever the new normal business environment and business networks will look like, the new normal, business networks must deliver a strong user experience.
Mm.
What do you see this involves?
No, this is a good question. I think I'll answer it in multi-prongs. One of them is the concept of new normal. Well, one of the things that we're seeing, not just in this research, but in other research that we're ongoingly doing, is that some of the trends that have developed because of COVID-19 aren't really going away. Or indeed, the immediate horizon for many organizations is not to wind back things or indeed look at it from the previous world, but really look at it from the current world and sort of accelerate it from this point onwards. And for many organizations, that means that, there's things that they might have thought about in terms of user experience or indeed their networks as something for the future have really just landed flat on their desk today and are not really about the future, but really about making it happen now. One of the things that we've seen also is that organizations have really turned what you'd call as a digital transformation strategy on its head in many instances. When we talk about user experience, wind back the clock 12 months ago, that might have been very much about just customers, mobile apps and those kinds of things that, were digital in terms of interfacing with end users or indeed consumers. But a lot of organizations realize that the fundamentals behind that are really what the transformation needs to commence with. The infrastructure of the business, the experience of the employees is just as important or even more important for many organizations when it comes to this digital transformation that's happening. And what we think is that this will continue for at least the next 2-3 years as workplace modernization, employee experience, and the infrastructure to manage this changed workforce becomes the top priority for many organizations. I don't think consumers are going away. We certainly will expect more investment in that area as well in the future, but clearly the pendulum has shifted towards the employee experience over and above just the customer experience.
Thanks, Fawad. What's your observation of the COVID impact? So it seems to me that most organisations have something of a strategic roadmap ahead of them, and they work quite often quite sequentially based on business cases and business need and so forth. And then you get a I'll call it a disaster, a chaotic situation, a security incident, for example, that just forces a range of changes to be made immediately. Is this, in the context of SD-WAN, are you seeing this as an unusual situation, the response?
Not really. I guess it comes down to the nature of the individual businesses out there, Tony. You know, there's organizations that are very conservative when it comes to investing in technology, and there's some that are a little bit more out there and certainly have been on the front foot. And I think what those organizations that have been conservative in the past have seen now is that their conservativeness or their bet on the conservative approach didn't really pay off. It really was those organizations that were on the front foot and making those early investments, you know, being ready for future capacity. Just that very basic concept, you know, has really helped those organizations that have made the investment in the past, because, you know, the increased traffic, the increased, you know, workloads. You can say, well, we didn't anticipate that was going to happen, but, you know, the path was only going one way. And I guess for a lot of organizations, it's not about being hard on yourselves and saying, oh, well, we should have done this or shouldn't have done that, but really about harnessing that motivation that came from COVID-19 in terms of hastening things and making things happen faster. You know, many organizations tell us, you know, what took us, you know, months to do in the past, we were able to do in weeks because of COVID-19. And that's because they ushered in a sense of urgency amongst their staff and got everyone on board, shooting in one direction to overcome the big challenge. And I think what organizations need to do in the future is kind of harness that same energy and bring it to the table, regardless of it being a pandemic or a disruptive situation, but really try and harness that motivation and look at technology as something that enables them to be more prepared for the future more than anything else.
It sounds like that old aphorism about fortune favours the well prepared absolutely plays out in a COVID unexpected situation, whether it's COVID today or some other situation. That need to be, you don't necessarily always have to be at the leading edge, but you need to ensure that your environment has the flexibility and agility that should you need to make a change, you can jump quickly when a disaster happens.
Absolutely. And we saw that in some of the percentage of the responses when we looked at respondents that actually didn't have a budget, for example, to make that investment, but still saw it as a strategic imperative. I think that, you know, that delta is really growing, and we're seeing COVID-19 really driving that, in that, you know, even understanding and educating on the technologies, the things that you might not need a current investment in, but certainly maybe a little bit of investment in time, is definitely worth it for those organizations that, you know, can see that this change that's happening around us is going to continue into the future for them.
Indeed, and I guess that flexibility must, for most organisations, extend to being able to have a range of providers that are able to be flexible at very short notice as well. That seems to come through from some of the material.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing that across, you know, a lot of the responses.
Great. Look, I'll just put out a final call to any people. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask, do let me know. I've passed.
I think one's just popped
up. Okay, let me perhaps just round out the session. So thank you again, Fouad. Look, my takeaways. You mentioned that the three top drivers on the adoption of SD-WAN were increased cybersecurity, better performance, and better integration of security and policy control. So at one level, no surprises. We've seen a large number of organisations in the last 12 months impacted by security related events, particularly ransomware, and And within the last 12 months, quite a number of large, mature, well-resourced corporate organisations have been hit in that space. So the view coming out from your research that adoption of SD-WAN can assist with enhancing the security stance for organisations is obviously key. The overall performance of the environment, the WAN environment, the data center to end user environment. Again, a key observation. And I think the last one there about better integration of those security policies and the control of policies, the over-the-top WAN management environment and the ability to have anticipated what potential impacts might be and to a greater or lesser degree have automated the organisation's primary response to that. So to users, whether they be customers or staff, to be able to shield them from the impact of what the network performance issue or fault may have been. Understand why that's absolutely up there as a major driver for moving to SD-WAN. The move to cloud has been ongoing for a number of years, and as Fawad mentioned, the what COVID has done is make that accelerate that move in almost a step function change, and associated with that move, so all of your facilities have moved to the cloud. It actually makes the wide area network even more critical to the ongoing quality of the service that you're delivering to clients and to staff. So therefore, given the benefits that SD-WAN brings to the control of that over-the-top WAN management environment, it's clear from your research that the investment in that environment is going to continue, if not accelerate. The final comment, I guess, is that as we all rapidly adapt to change, and there is that the comment about change being the new normal, the experience that you have within your organisations and the experience that you're able to pull from your current and potentially future partners is going to be absolutely key to your ability to seamlessly grow and continue to operate. So there are a couple of the things I've taken away from the Telsyte research that Fawad's taken us through today. So again, my thanks to you, Fawad, for your insights today. So just in closing, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And after you leave the webinar today, we'll be sending out a follow-up email in the next 24 hours or so, which will provide a link to today's webinar, which we've been reporting on. So on behalf of Vertel, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Have an enjoyable day. And on that note, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you.